The morning my older sister Vanessa called to tell me our father had died, he was sitting across from me at my kitchen table eating bacon from my plate. She calmly announced that Dad had passed away during the night and claimed he had left his entire estate to her and her husband, while I would receive absolutely nothing. Her husband laughed in the background, convinced they had finally won. My father simply smiled, stayed quiet, and let them believe their plan was working because the real surprise was waiting at his own memorial service. Only months earlier, my father, Harold Carter, had been living a peaceful retirement after spending decades running his auto repair shop. I worked as a traveling registered nurse several states away, and when Dad broke his wrist in a fall, my sister insisted she and her husband would care for him until he recovered. It sounded reasonable, so I returned to work believing he was safe. What I did not know was that they had convinced him to sign a limited power of attorney for paying bills, then slowly expanded their control over every part of his life. Soon my weekly phone calls stopped reaching him. Every time I asked to speak with Dad, I was told he was sleeping, resting, or unavailable. The smartphone I mailed never reached him, my letters disappeared, and every question I asked was answered with another excuse. When I visited for Christmas, Dad looked thinner and unusually quiet. He admitted he no longer had access to his own bank accounts because my brother-in-law handled everything. Whenever I suggested reviewing the finances together, they accused me of causing unnecessary family drama, and Dad begged me not to argue during the holidays. Months later, another nurse unexpectedly called me from a nursing home several hours away. She said an elderly resident constantly asked if anyone knew a nurse with my name because he desperately wanted to find his daughter. The patient was my father. Nobody had ever told me he had been moved there. When I arrived, he believed I had abandoned him because my sister had convinced him I knew where he was and simply chose not to visit. At the same time, she had been telling me he was happily living with her. We had both been manipulated by the same carefully planned lie. Since Dad was mentally healthy, I helped him discharge himself immediately. Together, we visited his bank and uncovered a devastating truth. Nearly $200,000 had disappeared from his savings. Large transfers had gone into companies connected to my brother-in-law. Payments had been made toward their Florida condo, and they had even tried to borrow against my father's fully paid home using forged documents. It was not just financial theft. They had stolen his independence, isolated him from everyone who cared about him, and nearly erased everything he had built during a lifetime of hard work. An experienced elder law attorney helped us cancel every fraudulent power of attorney, freeze the stolen assets, and report the fraud. While reviewing the paperwork, we discovered forged signatures supposedly completed while Dad was actually recovering from a medical procedure, making the documents impossible. Dad decided he wanted more than justice. He wanted everyone to see exactly who they really were. Instead of confronting them immediately, Dad allowed them to believe he had died. A trusted family friend informed my sister about his supposed passing, and exactly as expected, her first concern was not how he died or whether she could see him. She only wanted to know about his paperwork and estate. The next morning, she proudly called me before sunrise to announce that she had inherited everything and that I would receive nothing. Dad sat beside me listening to every word while quietly drinking his coffee. On Sunday, friends, neighbors, veterans, and church members gathered for the memorial service. My sister and her husband confidently stood before the crowd and presented a forged will claiming Dad had intentionally disinherited me. Just as they finished reading it aloud, the side door opened. My father calmly walked into his own funeral wearing his best suit. The entire room froze. Looking directly at my brother-in-law, he quietly said that dead men do not sign papers. In a single moment, every lie collapsed. Our attorney immediately presented authentic financial records, medical documents, bank statements, and proof of the forged signatures. Deputies waiting nearby stepped forward to begin their investigation, while my brother-in-law desperately tried to explain everything away. My sister admitted they had taken the money because they were drowning in debt, but instead of apologizing, she blamed me for exposing them. Dad simply reminded her that she had buried the wrong man. Most of the stolen money was eventually recovered, the fraudulent loan against the family home was permanently stopped, and criminal charges followed. My sister received probation and community service, while my brother-in-law lost everything he had built through deception. Dad returned to his own home, wound my late mother's old brass clock, and began teaching seniors how to protect their finances before trusting anyone with legal authority. His greatest lesson was one I will never forget. Money can always be earned again, But once someone steals your trust, your dignity, and your voice, getting them back is the hardest fight of all.